1 year with the Supro Royale. Hey everyone, I'm Jack Fossett and welcome to this 1 year review. I'm talking about the Supro Royale today, which is their flagship amp. And this one does do a lot, and it does a lot well, and I've had a unique experience with this amp, so I wanted to share a little bit with you for those of you who are looking at it and thinking about maybe getting one. So I have had this amplifier for a year now. It's been just slightly over a year, and initially it was a sponsored review done with Supro, and I've used it a lot over the past year for a combination of doing many different demo videos and also performances and things. And one of the things that I have found is that it is a very, very suitable kind of open-ended amp that has a great tone. It's really great as a pedal platform, which is what they bill it as, but it also has a unique vintage character. Now, before we get too much into the tone and the usability, I do want to mention one thing, that mine actually did have a defect that kind of popped up, and what I determined it had something to do with the way that the pots were mounted. It didn't happen all the time, but every so often when I would kind of like press on the knobs a little bit, if I applied any pressure, the master in particular would cut out. So get these crazy volume spikes. It did wind up being a manufacturer defect. I actually went through a local store who's a Supro dealer to have it dealt with. I did not deal with the people who are the people I contacted Supro, because I kind of wanted to not go through them, sort of see how it would go if I didn't do that. You know, what would it be? How well would they handle the warranty? You know, what would it be like kind of doing it through the store? It took a little while to kind of figure out what was going on with it, and it took a little while to find the right thing. What they eventually actually did was replace the amplifier part of it. But there was kind of no muss, no fuss, and it's worked ever since. So I did want to mention that. You know, I can't do a 1 year review without mentioning that the initial one had a problem, but they did fix it. I can't make any inferences on further amplifiers than that. This is the one that I've had. Every other Supro that I've had, you know, I had one used Supro once that had a little bit of a problem, but with used amps, you never know what that's all about. I've owned a bunch of Supros and none of them have pretty much ever had any problems, and the one that I had a problem with was just a defective reverb tank. This was years ago. It was and again, it was one that I got used and was very beat up when I got it. So all my other Supros I've never had a problem with, and they did take care of it without putting up any kind of a fight or giving me any hassle about it. So stuff happens. It's good when a company backs up their stuff. That's what I'll say about that. Now, moving on. This is a great recording and performance amplifier with its option between Class A and Class AB. You've got the 30 watts or the 50 watts. Really what that makes a difference in, besides tone, is definitely headroom. I found that when I was performing live with it, even on Class AB, believe it or not, you can get a good amount of crunch at lower volumes than you would expect with this amp, and part of it is just the voicing. The voicing has that classic Supro rhythm tone kind of on its own, where you dig into a chord and there's almost this inherent crunchiness to it. Part of it's just the way that the tone is. It's kind of hard to describe, but I'm going to play you some clips that I hope illustrate this a little bit. Between the boost, the effects loop, and the reverb features, you've got a lot that it can do just on its own, as well as dialing in a great tone. I like that it has a 3-band EQ. That makes a big difference for me. a lot of other Supro amps that I have played and also really love, but they only have a 2-band EQ, and I like having control of the mids, so that's really helpful. I did at one point change the speaker to a Weber Apex speaker. I have since switched back. This is the stock speaker that you're listening to now. And I think the stock speaker is good. It's a good quality speaker, you can definitely tell. It's a little on the dark and warm sounding end, and I have noticed that Supro amps in general, they kind of favor that type of speaker. Most of the Supro amps that I've played, the stock speaker tend to be on the darker and warmer side. It's not necessarily a bad thing, it's just a personal preference thing, but if you want to brighten this amp up, you could certainly get a higher watt, different voiced speaker that would open up some top end, particularly if you're going for more of the Class A, B sound, that classic American voicing sound, as opposed to the Class A, which is going to give you a little bit more of that crunch. It has a nice mix. Again, I mentioned it has a nice mix of being a good pedal platform, but also having this cool vintage thing that it does. It has its own character, but not in a way that overpowers the pedals, so you can use a number of different pedals with it and it'll sound really good and it'll work with them, but it also has its own unique voice that comes out. When you push the amp, particularly when you use the boost, it gets this really vintage tone, which is kind of cool. It's neat to have a pedal platform, particularly one that's a higher watt amplifier, this one going up to 50, that can also get a vintage sound. This one with the boost, it almost gets into that like fuzz territory, which is kind of cool if you really are playing a hard rhythm tone. So I'm going to give you some samples of that. Also use a couple of different pedals with it so that you can hear how good it sounds with pedals. I particularly like a blues breaker style overdrive with Supro amplifiers, so today I'm going to use the MXR Duke of Tone. You also heard it at the beginning with a Wampler Metaverse delay, and now we're also going to try it with a Keeley Hydra to add some harmonic tremolo, and do that while it's boosted so that you can hear how well some modulation effects actually integrate even when the amp is running a little bit harder. It still stays very dynamic. You can kind of pick lighter and get a nice cleaner tone. So I think this is a really great amp, and again, I've used it live, and it's performed really, really well. I've actually used it in a stereo rig with another single 12-inch amplifier, and it worked really great in that setting. I've used it for a whole lot of videos over the past year, and it's really done well with a number of different pedals, guitars, whatever it was that I was using. It seemed to handle very, very well and gave a nice tone. So do any of you have the Supro Royale? Do you have any of the other Supros that are kind of in the similar lineup? One of my favorite amps over the years has been the Supro Royal Reverb, which from my understanding, the Royal Reverb is one of the influences of this amp. There were a number of different amps they made over the years that they really liked and kind of wanted to combine their favorite features into one ultimate amplifier, so to speak, and that's what became the Royale. But the Royal Reverb is still one that I use frequently and I love. Let us know what you have. Let us know what your experience is. I'm Jack Fossett. Please remember to stick around for some more tone. Hope you enjoy the rest of the video.